Hello, everyone. I am Mekni Toujani. I hold PhD in experimental psycholinguistics. I am currently an ESL lecturer at Interlink International Institute at Yamama University in Saudi Arabia. At the same time, I am a researcher at the Research Lab Languages and Cultural Forums in Tunisia. Today's presentation is entitled, How Could Psycholinguistic Research on L2 Processing Enhance L2 Instruction? Actually, today's presentation is quietly motivated by Purba 2018 paper, The Role of Psycholinguistics in Language Learning and Teaching, and Ilaho Didastro issue 2019, Psycholinguistics, Implication for the Classroom. As both of them try to spotlight like the marriage between language learning / teaching and psycholinguistics. Purba 2018 assumes that the relationship between language learning and teaching and psycholinguistics dates back to a long time, and she asserts that psycholinguistic research or approach to language has influenced how learning and teaching are viewed, how the skills should be learned, and how individual differences should be taken into consideration in the language learning teaching interface. Similarly, Mota and Bochwitz 2019 mentioned that the present issue, in their introduction to this issue, that the output of experimental psycholinguistic research could possibly influence language learning and teaching and would result in a better learning experience. Accordingly, the aim of this presentation is to argue that experimental psycholinguistic research on L2 processing could be turned into the advantage of L2 instruction. Therefore, I will begin with overview, like a short overview of subdisciplines of psycholinguistics, the role of experimental psycholinguistics on L2 instructions through reporting 3 experiments here, their implications, and I will end up with concluding today's argument. Char 2015 classified psycholinguistics into kind of 7 sub-branches. We saw first of all, we have theoretical psycholinguistics. It deals with the theory of language relating to human mental processes. So social psycholinguistics is about the social aspects of language processes. We have later developmental psycholinguistics. It deals with both L1 and L2 acquisition. And here L2 acquisition or SLA, second language acquisition. Here the term second language or L2 refers to any language learned after L1. Experimental psycholinguistics deals with the mental processes behind acquisition, comprehension, and production of language, and usually it uses like a behavioral methods. A sister branch to experimental psycholinguistics is neurolinguistics. It answers the same questions of experimental psycholinguistics, however, using brain-related methodology. Then we have educational psycholinguistics. It deals with solving educational problems related to language learning. Finally, we have here applied psycholinguistics, and it is concerned with the application of the findings of the above mentioned subdisciplines in certain areas like teaching, learning, communication, and literature. What will be covered in this presentation could be the gray area, between experimental psycholinguistics, educational psycholinguistics, developmental psycholinguistics, most precisely SLI, and applied linguistics. In this presentation and reporting the subsequent experiments, I'll be actually joining Mota and Bochwitz's argument that the importance of the application of psycholinguistic research on L2 processing lies in its insights it can provide to L2 instruction. The experiments that I'll be reporting here are taken from Mekni Toujani 2014 and Mekni Toujani 2020 respectively. The original studies investigated both L1 and L2. However, L1 is beyond this, the scope of this presentation, and results on L1 are found on Mekni Toujani 2014, 2017, and 2020. So let's move to the first set of experiments. And here, this experiment reported in Mekni Toujani 2014 was to investigate, like the aim behind it was to investigate whether the depth of lexical-semantic processing in English is affected by sentential load. And here, Sanford et al. 2005 definition of depth of lexical-semantic processing was adopted, and according to them, depth of lexical-semantic processing is not always deep. It is somehow shallow in some occasions. One of these occasions, is sentential load. And sentential load is the sum of syntactic complexity and referential load. In this experiment, syntactic complexity was investigated through contrasting highly loaded sentences containing object-related clauses to low loaded sentences containing subject-related clauses. On the other hand, for referential load, it was investigated also contrasting high loaded sentences containing object-related clauses introduced by full MPs, okay, with sentences, low loaded sentences containing object-related clauses introduced by personal pronouns, okay. The study took place in Tunisia, investigating 72 master students of English and used the text change paradigm. And here, experiment 1A dealt with syntactic complexity. However, experiment 1, they dealt with referential complexity. The present study shows that there is no effect of sentential load on depth of lexical-semantic process in reading. It means that both relative clauses were difficult, or reduced lexical-semantic processing with these subjects. The explanation here that all relative clauses decrease lexical-semantic processing because relative clauses are not a feature of their L1, which is Tunisian Arabic in this case. Therefore, sentential load could be defined differently. Okay, we're just like saying sentential load all its relative clauses. Now, what could this imply to language teaching or L2 teaching is that when we have like something like a kind of feature that is not a feature of L1, this could like a kind of make it difficult for L2 learners, and therefore L2 teachers should avoid the extensive use of relative clauses, or should avoid the extensive use of text loaded with relative clauses, because this could hinder their deep processing of the meaning of the text. When those beginners gain reading competency and become somehow advanced readers, it's recommended that the teachers raise their awareness to the effect, the negative effect embedded relative clauses has on their deep processing, so they can pay more attention while facing such structures. Now let's move to the second set of experiments. And the focal problem behind it was to investigate the speed with which L2 readers are sensitive to anomalies, information with respect to prior text, and under two task demands. And here, readers, okay, sensitivity to spatial anomalies and character attribute anomalies was investigated, and a shallow instruction, which is a mere comprehension instruction, and a deeper one, adopting the protagonist perspective instruction. Again, the study took place in Tunisia, investigating 192 third-year students, okay, and the experiments used the contradiction paradigm. And here we have experiments 2A and B investigated spatial anomalies in the mere comprehension instruction and adopting the protagonist perspective instruction, respectively. Experiment 3A and 3B investigated protagonist characteristics anomalies in the case of mere comprehension instruction and adopting the protagonist perspective instruction, respectively. Okay. The results were similar across the 4 experiments, as L2 readers were not able to integrate spatial anomaly in the mere comprehension instruction. They failed to do so also in the protagonist perspective instruction. Concerning integrating the protagonist characteristics into their unfolding representation, it was also a failure in the case of mere comprehension and adopting the protagonist perspective instruction. Here, we should note that like the same participants were able to do so in L1, and they actually integrated spatial and information protagonist characteristics into their unfolding representation under the protagonist perspective instruction as shared in the articles Mekni Toujani 2017-2020. However, they failed to do so in their L2. Therefore, okay, it can be concluded that global coherence, okay, was absent, okay, for L2 readers in both cases of instruction, the shallow and the deep, and most probably here because their bottom-up processes are not automatized. Therefore, here the present set of results affirm that, L2 readers' limited proficiency put them at disadvantage. Okay, they could not take advantage of the facilitative effect that task events has on their L1, and they failed to integrate the information they're reading with their unfolding discourse representation. Therefore, teachers of L2 readers should aspire to have their students automate their lower level processes such as lexical recognition, sentence chunking, and parsing in order to allocate more resources to higher level integrative discourse processes. Again, more attention should be allocated to structures and vocabulary items that are problematic to L2 readers, like relative clauses, the one that we saw in the other set of experiments. Okay, what does this mean to experimental psycholinguists and ESL teachers? Okay, automatize lower level processes and practicing explaining the basic differences between N1 and L2 probably are essential. Okay, the idea of automatizing the low level processes is also mentioned and advocated in Holstein 2007, when he said that we should emphasize the importance for L2 learners to automatize their word recognition skills in listening and their word retrieval, like listening and reading, and their word retrieval in speaking and writing. What does this mean for experimental psycholinguists? That we do have sound psycholinguistic theoretical and empirical grounds, okay, addressing topics that are relevant to teaching and learning, and they can provide indeed direct and significant application for the classroom. However, they should be available. Okay, this is as advocated by Mota and Bochwitz 2019, in order to probably have a kind of better learning experience. Actually, what was covered in this presentation, like as I said, what was covered in this presentation is like a kind of, I was trying to argue that experimental psycholinguistic research could help, okay, L2 instruction, could help L2 teachers to take their, to take them into consideration. However, they should be accessible. And here I'm adopting also Rod Ellis' perspective. Actually, he developed these reasons for SLA, but I found them also directed to experimental psycholinguistic research. Indeed, okay, he mentioned these 4 reasons why you're doing this kind of research. We're doing it to satisfy academic curiosity, yes, to contribute to social practice, like informing policy making about immigrant population. This is specifically for bilingualism studies, and we conduct research in order to test ground theory, linguistic, cognitive, and social theories. However, okay, the main reason for me, okay, and it's applicable for this presentation, that we can help to guide language teaching, as I said, which constitute the rationale behind this talk. All right. So here, again, what does this mean to us experimental psycholinguistics and ESL teachers? I would like to conclude with this quote from Hidayat and Taib in 2020. Actually, they were emphasizing that teachers should make use of psycholinguistic knowledge However, this knowledge should be made accessible to these teachers who are not actually or mostly psycholinguists to be able to implement them in their classrooms, okay? It's not essential for experimental psycholinguists to start with a problem in L2 instruction. However, we can extend or project experimental psycholinguistics findings on L2 instruction in order to produce fluent L2 learners, okay? This might result in psycholinguistics applied to L2 instruction, and this is also an invitation, as here mentioned in Hidayat and Taik, for SLA researchers, okay, who are more involved in language teaching, more engaged in classroom research, to collaborate with experimental psycholinguists to provide more efficient teaching models. Okay. Thank you for listening. Okay, thank you for being here.